TechDaily.ai, your source for technical information. This deep dive is sponsored by Stonefly, your trusted solution provider and advisor in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, hyperconverged, and VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox cluster, AI servers, SA365, a turnkey security appliance in public and private cloud. Check out stonefly.com or email your project requirements to sales@stonefly.com. Okay, so today we're diving into something we all deal with, right? Presentations, slide decks.
Yep. Death by PowerPoint sometimes.
Hopefully not after this. But yeah, instead of just, generic tips, we did something different. We actually analyzed thousands, like a huge set of real-world slides from top consulting firms.
That's right. The idea was to see, okay, what are the common threads? How do these expert communicators actually structure information visually? What makes their slides effective?
Exactly. It's like looking under the hood.
Yeah.
And the goal for you listening is to pull out some really actionable stuff, things you can use to make your own slides clearer, more powerful, and less overwhelming for people.
Absolutely. We're not just talking about making things pretty, though that helps.
Yeah.
It's about the strategy behind it. The architecture of the communication. How do you make the message land?
Okay, let's get into it. First big thing we noticed. Slide titles. Seems basic, maybe?
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But the average title length was, get this, 14 words.
14 words. That sounds kind of long, actually.
It does on the surface. But here's the key. What kind of words? Around 72%, a big chunk, were descriptive, result-oriented, and used active voice.
So they weren't just labels like Q3 results.
Exactly. More like, new campaign drove 15% increase in leads. See the difference. It tells you the point right away.
It's the conclusion, basically, right there in the title.
Precisely. And we saw how you could string these together, like slide 1, innovation slowed during downturn, slide 2, but companies that kept innovating outperformed.
Okay, I see. Then slide 3. Sustained innovation leads to higher long-term profit. You get the whole story just from the titles.
You do, and think about why that works. You're giving the audience the roadmap up front. They know the takeaway before they even dig into the chart or the bullet points. It makes it much easier to process everything else.
Right. So the big takeaway for you here is stop just labeling your slides. Think, what's the core message? What's the one thing I need them to get from this? Put that in the title.
Summarize the insight. Lead with it.
And that idea of a core message, it connects directly to the next big finding, doesn't it?
It really does. The principle of one slide, one job. Our analysis showed something like 62% of slides focused on just a single clear message.
62%. And you said it was even higher if you included slides with like one theme, but maybe a couple of points in the title.
Yeah, closer to 76% then. The vast majority are really focused. We saw examples like just a slide saying 74% of vulnerable jobs pay less than $40,000 a year. Boom, that's the message.
One stark fact.
Right.
And what was interesting too was seeing related points deliberately put on separate slides.
Right, which raises the question, why not just, cram them together? Be efficient.
Yeah, save a click.
But they didn't. For example, one slide might show tech companies outperforming other sectors. Then the next slide details how the profile of the top 10 tech firms has changed.
They could have put that on one slide, technically.
Easily. But separating them gives each point more weight, more impact. It says this insight is important enough for its own space.
It forces focus. So again, for you listening, resist that urge, that temptation to just load up a slide with everything remotely related. What's the one job for this slide? Give it that space.
Okay, let's talk about density. How much stuff is actually on these slides? The average word count was pretty lean, around 100 words.
Only 100 words on average. That feels low compared to what you often see.
It does, and only 15% of slides had more than 200 words. And a lot of those were appendices, the backup detail.
Wow. So much for the wall of text approach. We definitely saw examples supporting that. Like a slide with a clear chart, maybe some supporting text, 108 words total. Then another making a key point with just 46 words.
It ties back to that one slide, one job idea, doesn't it? If you have one core message, you often don't need paragraphs of text to explain it. The visual does the heavy lifting.
The chart is central.
Absolutely. A big, bold, easy-to-read chart was usually the hero. The text was there to support, to explain, to add context, but not to be the main event.
So the advice here seems to be, embrace simplicity. Don't fear the white space. Use more slides if needed to keep each one clean and focused. Less really can be more.
Definitely. Now, structure. This was fascinating. Across thousands of slides, different companies, different topics. Guess how many basic layouts dominated?
Given the consistency so far, maybe 10? 15?
4.
Seriously, out of all those slides.
Just 4 core layouts accounted for about 70% of everything we looked at.
Okay, you got to tell us what they are.
Sure. The most common, almost 30%, was just a single chart slide. Title at the top, chart in the middle. Super direct.
Simple, effective. Okay, what's next?
Number 2, about 19%, was a chart on the left, bullet points on the right. Classic.
Yeah, you see that one a lot.
The number 3, around 12%, was a 2-column comparison layout. Good for showing contrast or options.
Makes sense. And the fourth?
Just a simple table slide, about 10%. For presenting structured data clearly.
So title chart, chart bullets, 2 columns, table, that covers 70%. That's remarkably consistent.
It is, and it suggests these structures just work really well. They're versatile. But also, think about the audience.
Predictability.
Exactly. When you see a familiar layout, your brain doesn't have to work as hard figuring out where to look or how the information is organized. It lowers the cognitive load. You can focus on the content.
So the takeaway for you is maybe you don't need a dozen custom layouts. Find a few reliable ones that work for your content and stick with them. Consistency helps your audience.
It really does. And speaking of helping the audience understand, visuals, their importance just jumped out of the data.
Yeah, what were the numbers there?
Well, 71% of all slides had a chart. And if you add in other visuals like diagrams, frameworks, concept maps, it was closer to 80%.
Wow, 4 out of 5 slides has some kind of visual element.
Which just hammers home the point. Showing is usually better than telling. Visuals make information easier to grasp, easier to remember. And honestly, data presented visually often feels more trustworthy, more credible.
And it wasn't just for quantitative data, right? We saw charts used for like phases of a project or maturity levels.
Absolutely. Visualizing concepts, processes, relationships, making the abstract more concrete. So the message here is pretty clear. Prioritize visuals. Always ask yourself, can I show this instead of just writing about it?
Okay, so visuals are key. And within visuals, charts are common. Did we see any patterns in which charts people used most?
Oh, definitely. One type was the runaway winner, bar charts.
Bar charts, simple bar charts.
Yep. Vertical and horizontal combined, they made up 40% of all the charts used. That means they appeared on roughly 1 in every 3 slides overall.
40%. Why are they so popular, do you think?
They're just incredibly effective for comparing quantities across different categories. Our brains are good at comparing lengths, so it's very intuitive. Simple, clear, hard to misinterpret usually.
Okay. So bar charts rule. What else was common?
Line charts were next, about 16%. Great for showing trends over time, obviously. And interestingly, waterfall charts were also pretty common, around 11%.
Waterfall charts. Refresh my memory. Those are the ones that show how a value builds up or breaks down, right?
Right.
Starting profit, then adding revenues, subtracting costs.
Exactly. They're brilliant for explaining the components of a change or a final value. Really good for financial storytelling, but other uses too.
So the takeaway is understand your chart types, but especially appreciate the power and versatility of the humble bar chart.
Don't underestimate the bar chart. And sticking with charts for a second, another simplicity point. Of the slides that did have charts, most just had one.
Only one.
Yeah, about 59%, nearly 3/5, used just a single chart. Maybe 15% used 2. 3 or more was pretty rare.
Again, it's that focus thing. Don't make visuals compete for attention on the same slide.
Right. One clear chart supporting the slide's main message is usually more powerful than trying to cram in several.
Okay, makes sense. Now, how did they make sure the key message within the chart landed?
Good question. Callouts. We saw them used frequently. About 72% of charts had some kind of callout.
Like a little text box pointing to a specific bar or circling a data point.
Exactly that. Or maybe highlighting a section. It's about actively guiding the viewer's eye, saying, look here, this is the important part. Don't make them hunt for the insight.
So use callouts strategically. Point out the key takeaway within the visual itself. Don't just drop a chart and hope people see what you see.
Precisely. Guide their focus.
Were there any other maybe more subtle design things that stood out?
Yeah, a couple of things. One was the use of color. It was generally pretty minimal and very intentional, not just decoration. Used for emphasis, for grouping, for maybe showing intensity with shades, but very restrained.
So not a rainbow on every slide.
Definitely not. And that tied into another point. A consistent design language, using the same style of icons, the same fonts, the same overall look and feel across the whole presentation.
Creates a smooth, professional, distraction-free experience, I guess.
Exactly. And one last structural thing was this effective top-down approach. You had that clear conclusion-style title at the top.
Right, the 14-word summary.
Yeah. often followed by maybe a supporting subtitle, and then the content, often laid out in a clean grid, made it really easy to scan and understand the flow of information.
Title, subtitle, visual, maybe some bullets. Clean grid,
Hmm.
easy to follow.
And when you put all these pieces together, the titles, the single message, the simplicity, the layouts, the visuals, the callouts, the consistent design, it all points back to one main goal.
Which is,
Focusing relentlessly on the insight, on the so what. Why does this information matter to the audience? How do we make that crystal clear and impactful?
okay, so let's try to boil this down. For you listening, the key takeaways seem to be: write titles that state the conclusion.
One main message per slide. Keep it simple.
Use visuals, especially charts. Don't be afraid of bar charts.
Use just one chart usually. And use callouts to highlight the key part.
Stick to a few consistent layouts. Don't go crazy with design flourishes.
And use color and icons thoughtfully, consistently. It's all about clarity and impact.
Right. So maybe a final thought to leave people with.
Yeah, maybe just this. Think about how consciously applying these principles, which seem pretty straightforward when you list them, could actually transform your communication. How much more effectively could your key messages land if you really focused on these evidence-backed ways of presenting information? Something to chew on.
Definitely food for thought. TechDaily.ai, your source for technical information. This deep dive is sponsored by Stonefly, your trusted solution provider and advisor in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, hyperconverged in VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox Cluster AI servers, SA365, a turnkey security appliance in public and private cloud. Check out stonefly.com or email your project requirements to sales@stonefly.com.